Hey, so I just wanted to start off by saying this is going to be my first video for Marvel Horror. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time, but there's always been a reason in life to not do this. I had to work, I have to earn income, I have to pay rent. It's always been something like that I just don't have the time for this when I have to make money just to survive. So honestly, I've been trying to do this for, I would say, maybe 12 years, maybe 14 years. And every time I've made an excuse of I need to focus on real life and none of this. But recently, I've, faced death like more than once. Like I faced death on multiple occasions in the span of I would say like 2 months or like 1 month. I won't get too into it. Maybe I'll make another video at some point. It's pretty horrific itself, but I guess it's Marvel related. So yeah, this is gonna be my first ever video. I've made music videos before. I have posted videos of Marvel Nemesis, which I do consider Marvel Horror, but created this channel like years ago, and I've never posted a video of myself like how I wanted to, talking about the things I want to talk about. Marvel Horror is really interesting in itself, and there's so much you can do with that. Now I'm just kind of talking out of my ass, so I'll end it and just start the subject of today, which is gonna be Johnny Blaze and Blazing Skull, or Ghost Rider and Blazing Skull, and we'll talk how they're kinda related, they're kinda not, how they could be, how they're not, but with retcons, they probably are, similar to, the OG Ghost Rider, the Western Ghost Rider who was retconned into the Phantom Rider, is now kind of related to Ghost Rider. So, yeah. Ghost Rider, one of the well-known and much adored part of Marvel Horror Comics, with many hoping he makes a cinematic debut for the third time in the actual Marvel Cinematic Universe, or however you want to put it. But have you ever heard of the Blazing Skull? He's a character with a fascinating backstory, much like our beloved Johnny Blaze, and though the two might look similar, there are things about them that are really different. What powers do the two have? How do they get them? Who'd win in a fight between the two? Let's get into it. Come along as we try and take a dive. I wouldn't say a deep dive, but a comparison between the two flaming skulls. This what really sets them apart from each other, and probably what they also do kind of have a lot of similarities that you'd probably be surprised about. If you enjoy these videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel with notification. I hope that these videos get better. This is my first ever. Actually, this is probably my 5th ever YouTube video, but it's like my 100th attempt. Like, I always record these things and I never edit them or post them, really. But we all love Marvel Horror. That's what we're here for, and that in itself, it's a what's the term? A niche, concept, and niche content, and I'm making it even more niche by talking about characters we just don't remember or never heard of, and the Blazing Skull is one of them. When trying to understand Ghost Rider's power, we must first look at its very source and how it's different from Blazing Skull's. Ghost Rider's powers are rooted in Zarathos and the spirit of vengeance. Zarathos was a demon who had established a powerful foundation for himself many years before. He had a penchant for collecting human souls, which landed him in hot water, especially with the cult of blood or the blood cult. Mephisto, who saw Zarathos as a rival. Because of these disagreements and Mephisto's conviction in their rivalry, he deceived and trapped Zarathos, imprisoning him in the bodies of numerous mortals over the years while keeping him amnesiac. Zarathos' torture mixed with Mephisto's pursuit of the mystic items known as the Medallion of Power to store the essence of the original spirits of vengeance. So, to clarify, Mephisto and Zarathos, two demons, had a rivalry. Mephisto could not just simply defeat Zarathos. He had too much of a following, and the more followings you have, the more power you have. Mephisto had to find the medallions of power that were created by the blood cult, and he used those medallions to defeat and trap Zarathos. After being damaged, this medallion had ingrained itself into the spiritual lineage of two families. One of these bloodlines, the Chaos, caught Mephisto's eye in the 18th century. When the medallion shard inside Noble Chaos turned him into the Ghost Rider, a spirit of vengeance, Mephisto attempted to corrupt Noble, but was unsuccessful, so he turned his attention to the rest of the Chaos clan and watched as they began to exhibit their strength as the firstborn noble of each generation. This is slightly different from the very odd and mysterious source of power from Blazing Skull. Blazing Skull's power mostly comes from the Skullman. Who the heck are the Skullmen? Glad you asked, because even we had to do some digging to find the dirt on these guys. The Skullmen are an ancient subterranean race of humans that have learned certain mystical techniques that allow them to turn their flesh invisible, revealing their skull, develop immunity to fire, a blazing aura, superhuman physical abilities, and a regenerative healing factor. They reside in China's underground caverns. So already you can see that there's some powers that align with the Ghost Riders in general, with the flaming skull, the flaming aura, being able to regenerate, and later it shows that they're both pretty much immune to death. So the Skullmen, they live separated from the surface world, and they turn their flesh invisible in order to not be misled by physical appearance. They have faith in the undefined forces of destiny, leading them to believe that Mark Todd arrived to serve as their emissary to the world of flesh. So, to clarify, the Skullmen are pacifists, and Mark Todd kind of met them. I guess I'll just go over it later, but basically during the war, that's when Mark Todd ran into them, and because they were pacifists, they kind of used Mark Todd as their like avatar to stop war. Let's talk about their backstory now. Let's go to their early lives. Well, as it turns out, since the Blazing Skull is such an old character and not much is known about him, still, his backstory isn't quite as rich and developed as Ghost Rider's, but it is pretty interesting, so we'll break it down for you. Not only does he not have much to be told in the comics, he actually has mysteries outside of the comics. Like, I did research with someone else, and we kind of think we know who created him, who wrote him, but also it's a what's that called? It's a name that a lot of writers use. Like, it was a fake name, a cinnamon or whatever you call it. So it's possible that he wasn't created by him and everything. So it's unsure. But anyways, That's actually why I decided to talk about him, because there's not much about him, and he's a mystery inside the comics and out. And yeah, he's an interesting character, and I do believe he is related to the spirits of vengeance and you know, maybe not Mephisto and Zarathos in that way, but for sure the spirits of vengeance. So Mark Todd's backstory is on October 7th, 1910. Mark Anthony Todd was born in Cleveland. As a foreign journalist and pacifist reporter, he was dispatched to cover the Second Sino-Japanese War for his newspaper. He was forced to take sanctuary in a cave amid a Japanese artillery barrage. There he encountered the Skull Man, an odd species with burning skulls for heads. They informed him he had been chosen by fate to be the champion of freedom, and began his training, which provided him with powers such as fire resistance. After completing his training, he went home and, inspired by the atrocities of Nazism, donned a uniform with a blazing mask, adopting the moniker the Blazing Skull. Over time, as he continued to master the Skullman's techniques, he was able to imitate his master's appearance by turning his flesh invisible, and so he also stopped wearing his mask. Yeah, so that's also something that's interesting. When he first started, if I remember correctly, it was just a skull mask, and it wasn't even flaming. And then later, it was a mask that was flaming, and then later, it was no longer a mask, and he could just create a flaming aura. His backstory is odd, a very convenient sounding one. Johnny Blaze's story, on the other hand, we're sure a lot of you would know, is a spectacular one. I like to point out that it's not what the films with Nicolas Cage is, but after those movies came out, there was retconning done in the comic books. My personal belief is that, you know, all of it is canon. But originally, when I remember being little and watching that film and thinking, that's not how it said it went in the comics. But I think by volume 5, they said it kind of is that way, you know. But let's go to the comic origin. Barton Blaze and Naomi Cale's son, Johnny Blaze, was raised amid the Quinton Carnival during his early years. His parents both starred on Crash Simpson's motorcycle show. So they're both part of the carnival, and the parents' they were a motorcycle team for entertainment. So it wasn't their carnival, it was, you know, someone out, Crash Simpson's carnival, and they just worked for him, and, you know, they went all around the world, and they took, obviously, Johnny Blaze with them. And that's something that Johnny Blaze would also later go on to do. So he was inspired by his parents, and he probably learned by them. You know, they're stunt people, so they probably did teach him early on, because he was like doing that stuff as he was a teenager. So he probably did that stuff when he was even younger. Johnny's life seemed to be perfect until his mother, Naomi, abandoned him and left with his siblings, Barbara and Daniel. So that's something that's never been shown in the movies, and might come up later. I know there was a Dan Cale or something like that in She-Hulk. So a Donald Blaze, yeah, in She-Hulk. So I don't know what that is about, but it does kind of align with what we saw in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when that Ghost Rider kind of showed up. Johnny Blaze had a sister named Cale and a brother named Daniel Ketch. So, and you see they all got different last names, but that's because Daniel was adopted. So they were all separated. So they all thought they were just single children. Because Naomi was aware of her family's curse and feared that Johnny would face the same fate as she had, she made the decision to leave him and give his siblings to Francis Ketch, whose name they would inherit. Even Johnny's brother, Danny, ended up becoming a Ghost Rider, but that's a different story for a different time. Eventually, Naomi would come back to look over him, but still fearful that Kale family curse would touch him. This prompted Naomi Kale to make an arrangement with Mephisto in order to protect Johnny from the family curse and ultimately put an end to it. It won't surprise anyone to know, though, that Mephisto ended up betraying Naomi. The demon made a promise to Naomi in the final moments of her life that Johnny would still become a Ghost Rider, not the Ghost Rider, and that's a big distinction, I think, even though it's kind of not like that anymore. But it's strange. It's really strange, and I'll get into that later. Even if he wasn't going to become the real Ghost Rider he was meant to be, he's going to become a Ghost Rider. And originally, the essence of that is that the real Ghost Riders are the spirits of vengeance. But what Johnny Blaze was, he was Zarathos. Spirits can become spirits of vengeance, but the original spirits of vengeance were like created by gods, basically. That's the assumption. And when they'd possess a human, or they become the Ghost Rider, they become Ghost Riders, you know? That was their moniker. But what Johnny Blaze is, and what even some of the new Ghost Riders are, they're not really the original spirits of vengeance. They are spirits of vengeance, but for instance, the new one, Robbie Reyes, he has his Uncle Eli in him. I think not anymore, but just for context, let's say he has his Uncle Eli in him, which Uncle Eli's spirit did become a spirit of vengeance and possessed Robbie Reyes, but he's not the spirits of vengeance. He's not those original. So his abilities are different, his powers are different, and the assumption is he's not as strong. He's not as strong as the actual original spirits of vengeance who were created by God to kind of cut down on sin, sinful humans. So God, the first thing God did was flood the world, and that killed like all the non-believers and sinners. And then in Marvel Comics, the second thing is that he created the spirits of vengeance. And it wasn't just God, like the Christian God. It was all gods. So in Marvel Universe, there's multiple devils, there's multiple Satans, there's multiple Lucifers, and there's multiple gods. There's the, Hindu God, there's Christian God, there's Catholic gods, and they can all be different, and they can all be the same. So, and I don't know if I'm confusing anyone, but basically their names are interchangeable. Their names are interchangeable. It doesn't matter to them. They're gods. Their names are interchangeable, and they sometimes pretend to be one another because, fuck humans. We're ants to them. It doesn't matter. They like to have fun. So, I guess that kind of brings more context to that new crappy Thor movie. Anyways, Johnny ended up following in his parents' footsteps. So he started, doing the stunt cycle extravaganza. And he started not really caring about his well-being, honestly. Johnny ended up following his parents and the Simpsons in the family business. The Crash Simpson stunt cycle extravaganza, blissfully oblivious of his connection to several supernatural forces. During this period, Johnny had grown to see Crash as a father and had been taught how to ride and pull stunts on motorbikes by Crash, who hoped that his foster son would carry on his legacy. So Naomi left, the mom left, and then the father, Barton freaking died in a motorcycle accident. Johnny was alone, and he attached himself to Simpson, the owner of the carnival. And Simpson, he only had a daughter, Roxanne, and so he kind of attached himself, all his hopes and dreams, to Johnny, which it was kind of not, like on the outside it was happy, good relationship, but honestly, it was like codependent, and they put a lot of pressure on himself, and Johnny felt that stress and that pressure of like taking over the carnival and owning and being the best stunt rider and all that stuff. And unknown to Johnny, Crash Simpson and Barton and Naomi, they all were involved in like Satanism, in calling Mephisto, and they all studied that stuff. And I don't know what the assumption is there, but Johnny himself started getting into that stuff, and I doubt that he was pushed by any human, force. I think that maybe Mephisto would leave maybe books around. This is just complete speculation because it never says, but there's too much coincidence that the devil is watching him, and all his parent figures were all involved in the same dark stuff. So coincidentally, he gets involved in he starts learning supernatural things, and Roxanne, who's the daughter of Crash Simpson, she does too, actually. So basically everyone in the carnival is a Satan worshiper. No, it's just them. It's just the immediate, family and friends of Johnny Blaze. So it would be Johnny Blaze, Crash Simpson, Roxanne, Naomi, and Barton. They were all involved in supernatural, and before Johnny turned into Ghost Rider, he was learning. Him and Roxanne were both reading satanic books and rituals and stuff. When Johnny was 15, Mona Simpson, the wife of Crash Simpson, was killed while practicing a stunt that also almost cost Johnny his life. Making this dream come to an end, Mona asked Johnny to quit riding while on her deathbed, and Johnny, greatly affected by the loss, agreed to do so. Yeah, so Mona kind of, I don't know, there is a lot of death that goes on being a stunt driver for a carnival. And when Mona was dying, because she had her motorcycle crashed into a tree, I believe, and she was on her deathbed, and she told Johnny to not do it, to make a promise, and Johnny promised. And he's only 15, and like I said, there's a lot of tragedy in Johnny's life that probably didn't shape his mind really a good health-wise. Johnny would go on to refuse to participate in Crash's show for the next 5 years. He never told Crash about the promise he made with Mona, and he also never told him about his relationship with Roxanne, Crash's daughter. Eventually, when Crash learned that he had cancer and would soon die, he begged Johnny to take over the family show once more. Johnny continued to reject the idea, to the disappointment of even Roxanne, Crash's daughter. As a result, Johnny just couldn't accept that Crash was going to die, and it's not hard to understand after how many people he had lost. But because of that, Johnny kind of went into the occult, and it's all kind of probably derived from the tragedies, to turn to the occult and the mystic, to saving his foster dad. So that's what he trying to summon Satan. Johnny ended up summoning Mephisto, the one demon his mother had died trying to keep him away from. So we can accept, everyone widely accepts that he summoned Mephisto, but it wouldn't matter at the time, because later in the comics they say that there's a group, like I said, there's multiple Satans, Lucifers, and devils and stuff, and there's a group of these Satans and devils, and they like to sometimes they like to work together. So even if you sell your soul to, let's just say, Lucifer, Mephisto might get it, because they're kind of like a business. That is the greatest example. Let's say hell and there's multiple different houses. So just like there's multiple different like McDonald's, out there, it's just still one company, room full of Ronald McDonald's controlling them all. And you make this deal, you make this contract with one of them, you make it with all of them. So it doesn't matter if it was Mephisto or not. Other devils and Satans would come up and say it was actually them who Johnny made the deal with. But in the long run, it really doesn't matter, because he fucking signed the contract, and now all the devils, all the fucking Mephistos, all the Lucifers, his soul belongs to them. Mephisto agreed to cure Crash in exchange for Johnny's eternal servitude. Johnny agreed, and Crash was spared only to die in a stunt shortly after. After Crash's death, Johnny turned into the Ghost Rider for the first time, and the rest is history. Both the Ghost Rider and Blazing Skull have fascinating backstories, but just what powers do they really have? Who's more powerful out of the two? Well, when it comes to the Blazing Skull, Todd can transform himself into a burning skeleton thanks to the prolonged exposure. He can generate heat and flame, has Class 10 superhuman strength, and is exceedingly strong and nearly indestructible in this form. He appears to no longer age in his regular state and could go without eating or drinking. Todd has a healing factor as well, which has prevented him from physically aging since the Second World War. Originally, the Blazing Skull had some control over fire in addition to increased strength. He is also a very skilled investigator, although his weakness certainly raises eyebrows. Like many Marvel superheroes, he is known to suffer from sanity issues, but hilariously enough, according to Marvel Zombies Destroy issue 5, one of his biggest weaknesses is zombie goats. Make of that what you will. That's something stated officially in Marvel. You can already tell that some of his powers kind of align with Ghost Rider, the super strength, the not aging, except Johnny Blaze doesn't age when he's Ghost Rider, but he does age when he's human. So that there's a difference there, but you can see the similarities. Being almost invulnerable, being really hard to kill, that's something they both have. In Invaders, I believe Blazing Skull's head was exploded, and he was able to reform that and be okay. And in Ghost Rider, his head has been exploded, I think more than once. I think once Hulk did it, but another time Doctor Strange exploded his head, and he was able to regenerate from that. As for Ghost Rider, it won't surprise you at all to know that he's one of the most powerful characters in the Marvel Universe. Johnny does not possess any superhuman or supernatural talents when he is in human form. However, as the Ghost Rider, he makes a deadly combination of work with his skilled stunt ability and Zarathos' supernatural talents. Originally, Johnny could only transform automatically at night or in the presence of evil, but recently he has been shown to transform at will or whenever innocent blood was spilled. And I'd like to point out that that's kind of similar to how Todd couldn't control his transformations either. Todd originally had to wear a mask, and he slowly learned how to transform to the point where he didn't need to wear a mask. But for Todd, it came out of training, and with Johnny, it came just from experience. And eventually, he just learned how to do it naturally. Johnny Blaze is merely a mortal, and according to Doctor Strange, he serves as a built-in safety for the spirit of vengeance, greatly reducing the strength of Ghost Rider. According to Doctor Strange, when Zarathos takes control of the Ghost Rider, however, the Ghost Rider's ability are essentially limitless and godlike. Since Ghost Rider is widely depicted as having limitless strength, to the point where he was able to defeat Doctor Strange in combat, Johnny Blaze is unsurprisingly considered one of the strongest and most powerful beings on Earth. And I'd like to point something out. So, if you notice, from what I said earlier and what I'm saying now, there's a difference between the spirit of vengeance and Zarathos. At least originally, Johnny Blaze had Zarathos in him, and he wasn't one of the original spirits of vengeance, right? He was just a spirit of vengeance, a Ghost Rider, and that's what allowed Mephisto to break the deal with Naomi Kao, with Johnny Blaze's mother. But later, after the movies, the original spirit of vengeance, one of the originals, just so you know, there's multiple. They're all around the world, and so one of the original spirits of vengeance, and they can be fused. So there's more than just one spirit of vengeance. Original spirits of vengeance. They were created by the gods, and they've been fused before, and they've been separated, and we've seen them in heaven, and we've seen them in hell. So there's a bunch. They have, it's like its own society, just like the Skull people, you know. It's like their own society in heaven, hell, on earth, in limbo. Even in limbo, there's spirits of vengeance there. So they never say why or how it happened, but after the movies with Nicolas Cage, Zarathos and one of the original spirits of vengeance fused, and I think that's kind of funny because I think that's something that Zarathos, at least going by the original run, the Volume 1 Ghost Rider with Johnny Blaze, that's something that Zarathos probably hates. Like he would not fuse he would want the power of one of the original spirits of vengeance, but he wouldn't want to be a spirit of vengeance. It's torture to him. So that's something to clarify. They used to be separate. Zarathos used to be a separate from the original spirits of vengeance, and at some point, it doesn't say in the comics, he fused with an original spirit of vengeance and became kind of what's the word? He became linked to what the guidelines and rules that bound the original spirits of vengeance. Where else, when you're a lost soul, for lack of better definition, and you become, what a different spirit of not an original, but a spirit of vengeance like Robbie Reyes' uncle, you're not bound by any rules. You can be evil, you can be good, you can do whatever you want, but Zarathos can't at some point. And I think I'm now thinking about it hard, I think I do know when Zarathos was bound by with a spirit of vengeance. I don't think it's necessarily Mephisto's fault, but I think that did kind of I think that could have been a possibility. But there was also a time where I won't get into it. Let's just say that for now and going forward, Zarathos is bound to one of the original spirits of vengeance who didn't really have a personality. They're kind of like robots, the spirits of vengeance, where they have one goal that God gave them, and God, you know how God works with angels and stuff. He doesn't want to give them emotion and free will, and that's something that's in the Bible. Angels don't have free will, so the spirits of the original spirits of vengeance don't have free will, but the non-God created spirits of vengeance do. So Robbie Reyes' uncle, and I keep bringing that up as an example. There is other non-original spirits of vengeance that they have free will. They can do whatever they want to an extent once they remember, who they are, their name and everything. But let's move on. When Zarathos takes control of the Ghost Rider, however, the Ghost Rider's abilities are essentially limitless and godlike. Since the Ghost Rider is widely depicted as having limitless strength to the point where he was able to defeat Doctor Strange in combat, Johnny Blaze is unsurprisingly considered one of the strongest and most powerful beings on Earth. He has superhuman strength, which enables him to carry up to 25 tons under normal circumstances, but the supernatural nature of his abilities allow him to amplify the strength to unimaginable heights if he so chooses. Furthermore, when Johnny turns into Ghost Rider, his flesh melts away, leaving just his skeleton, which is infused with haunting flames. In addition to giving Ghost Rider infinite superhuman stamina during physical activity, this supernatural energy also prevents him from ever becoming tired. The magical energies that are imbued in the Ghost Rider enable him to instantly regenerate any damage that has been done to his being, even to the point of completely regenerating lost limbs in a matter of moments and regenerating his skull after it had been destroyed in a matter of seconds without any discomfort or obvious pain. As if he wasn't already amazing enough, he can manipulate hellfire and instantly sense supernatural presence. So that's something, like I said, that's something similar to Blazing Skull. He can regenerate as well. He can control fire as well. Maybe not to the extent of Johnny Blaze, but he can manipulate fire and he can regenerate. The regeneration is to the extent of Johnny Blaze. It might even be better. So Johnny Blaze can control fire better, but the Blazing Skull can regenerate better, I believe. But yet, I think I've seen Blazing Skull get tired and be exhausted and be sleepy, but Todd is insane. So any contradictories, you can kind of just say, oh, he's crazy. He's insane. He doesn't know what he's talking about or what he's doing. He's lost his mind a long time ago. He's lived too long, and the human mind should not be living that long. So anyways, Johnny Blaze has a whole host of other abilities like ride symbiosis, chain manipulation, and dimensional travel. But his strongest one is perhaps his most famous and beloved, the Penance Stare. So these abilities that I'm talking about are abilities that freaking Blazing Skull doesn't have. Though Blazing Skull does ride a motorcycle into war on occasion, and he has used like a chain or a whip or something. He doesn't have those are natural human traits that he had and has, and he doesn't have no Penance Stare. With the Penance Stare, Johnny can look into... Anyone who looks into Ghost Rider's eyes will see and feel every bit of suffering they have ever caused anyone during their whole lives. The victim will consequently experience anguish, pain, and guilt all at once. If the individual finds the effects to be insufferable, agonizing, they can become depressed and even die as a result. The Penance Stare is so powerful, it has exposed identities, caused an angel to explode, and rendered the people of Mojo World unconscious, all while inflicting enormous misery. Even Deadpool has been forced to reconsider and regret his violent background and heroic journey as a result of it. It's one of the most spectacular and powerful abilities in all of Marvel, and best part, it's every villain's kryptonite. Yeah, the Penance Stare is crazy, and I did research on another character called the Phantom Rider who may have started the Penance Stare. But speaking of just Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider's Penance Stare, it's unique and something that people don't realize, readers don't realize, because they never outright stated. And this is a product of having many writers and maybe retconning, but in universe, the Penance Stare can affect different people differently depending on their mindset and their guilt and everything. So usually, they feel their guilt and their pain, the pain of everyone they've ever inflicted pain on. But there have been times where people have been immune, even humans like Frank Castle, the Punisher, I think he's been penance there twice, and one time he said he doesn't feel guilty for anything he did, so it doesn't affect him. Then I think another time he said he wasn't affected, but then he kind of like threw up. He felt nauseous, but so maybe it was just a huge bluff. Maybe both times Frank Castle, he's just the Punisher. He just bluffed his way out of it, but I don't know. So, verdict. It's not a surprising conclusion, but the Ghost Rider beats Blazing Skull in every single category, and quite comprehensively to say the least. Sorry to Todd, but you're not Ghost Rider. You're not Johnny Blaze's level quite yet. Johnny's story can perhaps be best summed up by how he managed to beat Mephisto at his own game, trickery, by becoming the Lord of Hell and breaking Mephisto's hold on him. Not only that, when there's been times when Johnny Blaze has lost, thrown away Ghost Rider, even in human form, Johnny Blaze has been able to best devils, satans, and gods, even though outwardly other people kind of consider him an idiot, kind of like white trash, redneck. The Alejandra Ghost Rider, and he was kind of, teaching her how to be a Ghost Rider and everything, and she considered him an idiot. But every time she didn't do what he said, he turned out to be right. Every single time. So, me reading this, I kind of realized that maybe his idiocracy is like a cover, or maybe he's just like, Ash Williams from Evil Dead. He's kind of sucks at everything else except being a Ghost Rider, except being able to beat or not even being a Ghost Rider, just being able to beat the devil. He always beats the devil at his own game. Someone who's been around for centuries. And there's also this this rumor started in the Doctor Strange comics that Mephisto himself used to be human back in the day, back in the Zarathos days, and he made himself, a devil. So he basically rose up into that business, that freaking devil Satan business. So, and he's been able to beat someone who's lived that long, who's basically been immortal. Johnny Blaze versus Ghost Rider. I think they're related in some way. Obviously, Ghost Rider is much more powerful, is much different, but in the end, if these two opponents fought, Johnny Blaze would be on top. He's much more cunning, even though Blazing Skull's craziness, insanity might throw Johnny Blaze off for a while. He's faced devil. He's not just faced one devil like Mephisto. He's faced multiple. He's faced one that calls himself Lucifer, one that calls himself Satan. He's faced, Mephisto. That's already 3 in comic, and we don't know which were which, because like I said, they can interchange, they can work together, they can work apart, and he's Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze single-handedly has always defeated him, and not by just sheer force, but by outsmarting him, and that's something we have not gotten in live action yet, where we show kind of like this. On the outward, he's an idiot, but on the inside, he's a savant. So for the cliff notes, I wanted to kind of point out that the writer credited with creating Blazing Skull is Bob Davis. And the reason I wanted to point the writer out is because as a young kid, I never paid attention to the writers, just the story and the in-story lore. And I've never really paid attention to how it, they came up with the stuff. But like I said in the beginning, Bob Davis may have been a pseudonym for multiple writers. Blazing Skull first appeared in Mystic Comics issue 5, and I was thinking read all those issues that he appeared in, because I don't think there's many. I think maybe like 20, and I might make another video where I just sum up every issue, and it shouldn't take long. I don't think it should take really much longer. And he's one of the many heroes who were created to fight Nazis. His origin story, though, appeared in Invaders Volume 2, Issue 3 by Roy Thomas. He also appeared in Marvel Knights Issue 9, which that's what started this video. Marvel Knights Issue 9 kind of credited him as the original Ghost Rider or something like that. And I kind of thought, well, let me do some research. And honestly, I do believe he's part of the Ghost Rider lore in some way, that they're connected, just not connected by, Satan and all that other lore, just connected by the spirit of vengeance. My theory is that the Blazing Skulls maybe worship the original spirits of vengeance, and they're pacifists. They're not sinners. They don't sin even when they're close to death and there's war. They don't sin, and I think in some way that kind of aligns with the beliefs that the original spirits of vengeance were created for. You don't sin, or else we're gonna get you. I think that's all the notes I wanted to kind of get out there. And thanks for watching. This is a video I've been trying to make for a long time, and I finally got the courage to do it, and I hope to keep this channel going. I didn't expect this video to be this long, and there's a lot of personal stuff that I mentioned earlier about that's going on in my life, and it's made me want to do this, because it's actually a dream of mine. I'm not getting paid for this. In fact, I'm losing money to do this. So that I hope that shows how much I do care about Marvel horror comics and the lore and everything. And I do, if you go to my Facebook group that I created, Marvel Horror Comics, you would see that I do get in arguments with people, and that's because I'm really passionate about this stuff, and I'm really passionate about the lore. And there's still a lot that I need to learn. There's still a lot for me to learn from you guys, and I hope you guys can agree that there's a lot you guys can learn from me, and we can do that together. And if you guys have any ideas for another video, let me know. And like I said, I like doing these niche videos that no one else does. I could have done the Phantom Rider, but there's so many videos on the Phantom Rider already, but I still might do it. I don't want to do the easy ones where it's like I will do them, but I'm just saying that I don't want to do something that I can already search up, and someone has already done research for me, because at that point I'd just be copying them, but we'll see how this goes. And I don't have a Patreon, I don't have I don't think I have ads and I don't have people. Like I said, if you like this, subscribe, like, whatever. I do hope, obviously, who wouldn't hope to be able to profit off of just talking about what you're passionate about, so I don't have anything. I don't have Patreon or ads or anything like that, but maybe in the future I will, and hopefully you guys won't consider me a sellout. And if you want to hear more about my personal life, feel free to comment about that, because it's a horror in itself. It's a tragedy in itself that people keep getting screwed over, not by people who I considered really close and loved, and I almost died and no one cared, I'm just in a situation right now where it's getting better. It's for sure getting better. Okay. Thank you guys. Bye.